Thank you for coming this afternoon. I imagine that all of us, many of us, are struggling with some of the ways that our neighbors are suffering in this difficult moment in our nation. It's my intention this afternoon to challenge each of us, myself included, CCHF, and the church, to consider what it means to truly love our neighbor. As I talk, it's possible that I'll talk about the church a lot. When I say that, I'm talking about us too, and about my family and about me. I understand that each of you are my brothers and sisters in Christ. Though my words may be difficult to hear, please know that it is not my intention to hurt, but rather to inspire each of you to take seriously the call to follow Jesus. I will provide time at the end of the session for questions, and I'm happy to stay after to answer any issues that come up or that linger. I wanted to open us in prayer. God, this afternoon, I commit each person in this room to you. I thank you for my brothers and sisters in Christ. I thank you that we are a part of your church, your plan. We're part of the solution. I pray that you'll give me the words to speak that will be able to be heard and used to inspire all of these folks here in this moment. I thank you for your presence. In your name, I pray. I was born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My wife and I, originally our parents were Amish. We grew up beachy Amish. That meant we had black cars to drive in instead of horse and buggies. When I was a young boy, my parents moved to Belize in Central America, and I grew up as a missionary kid. That's where I gained my desire to be a doctor. Eventually, all along, thought that I would end up as a doctor in another country, a missionary doctor meeting the need in some place like rural Belize. There were three things that happened along the way that changed my mind. The first is in Buffalo, in medical school, Joyce and I got introduced to a small Mennonite church in the city that was mostly first-generation Mennonites, and they were called to be Jesus to the community there. The second was that in my third year of medical school, I realized, honestly didn't realize it till then, the way the poor were treated in this country by our healthcare system. And the third was CCHF. I think it was in medical school where someone gave me an edition of H&D. That was a journal that was done by CCHF. It would come out, I think, quarterly. And in reading that, I was like, it made me realize that maybe the call was to actually be here and be Jesus to the community in the United States. Along the way, CCHF has been a huge blessing. Originally, when Joyce and I started Jericho in 1997, we were alone. There we had us and secretary and a nurse. And first week we saw 3 patients, and the first 5 to 10 years were very difficult. And coming to this conference and being inspired that there were other people who have done this and have been willing to put in the work and eventually were able to grow and make a difference is a key reason why Jericho Road has grown into what it is today. We now are a large organization. We employ over 600 people in Buffalo and across the world. We provide primary health care at 5 different health centers in Buffalo. More than 50% of our patients don't speak English. And we also run a shelter for asylum seekers. We are partner with the University of Buffalo to do a family medicine residency program. And we have a global work that now spans 3 countries and 5 health centers and sees more patients on a monthly basis than we do in Buffalo. Maybe a statistic that I'm the most proud of with all of our work at Jericho now, almost 30 years, is that last year we delivered more than 2,500 babies across our system. Now, most of those were in other countries, but over 400 of them were in Buffalo. And I see James smiling. I think last week we delivered 21 in Buffalo, and we lost some sleep, but that's our work. So I have had the privilege of being witness to the way our healthcare system treats the poor and the way so many other ways that we sometimes fail our neighbors. Our story, our guidance, our mission comes out of the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. I want to spend a little time with this. Forgive me for reading. A rich young attorney walked up to Jesus and challenged him to define what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. Jesus asked what he thought, and the young man replied, "Love God with all your mind, your heart, your soul, love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus told him this was a perfect answer. The rich young man could have walked away at that moment satisfied, but I think he was struggling with the practical implications, right? Like, who is your neighbor? Because who your neighbor is determines how easy it is to love that person. Jesus then told the following story. A Jewish man was traveling on the Jericho road from Samaria to Jerusalem when he was beat up by robbers, left for dead alongside the road. A priest came by and saw him lying there, and instead of stopping to help, he kept going on his way. A law professor stopped, also declined to help. It was a Samaritan man who, seeing the nearly dead person along the way, stopped. He put him on his donkey, took him to the local medical center, paid for him to be nursed back to life. Jesus' audience must have been shocked by this twist in the story. Jews and Samaritans were sworn enemies. Jewish people did everything they could to avoid even traveling through Samaria. Yet in this story, it was not the Jewish priest or teacher who was the hero, but instead a Samaritan, an enemy, who actually cared enough to help and whose actions exemplified what it meant to love one's neighbor. In telling this story, Jesus shattered the idea that our neighbor needs to be someone who looks like us, lives on our street, speaks our language, or shares our cultural background. Instead, our neighbor is anyone we contact along life's pathway who is in need. In this story, Jesus also provides a powerful example of what it means to actually love our neighbors. This is the story that we got our name from. The first question I'd like to consider this morning is, who is my neighbor? And for each of you, that may be a little bit different. What you are dealing with in the places you come from may be different than what we are dealing with in Buffalo. Recently, due to the actions of the current administration, many of our neighbors are suffering. I want to describe to you what we are seeing at Jericho Road today. I think it is important that we do not hide our eyes from what's happening to some of the most vulnerable in our communities. I also want to say, just as a parenthesis, that all the photos in this presentation are of my friends at Jericho Road. So refugees are our neighbors. When we started at Jericho in the mid-90s, we thought we were going back to beat up, working class, poor neighborhood on the west side of Buffalo, mostly inhabited by Italians who had not decided yet to flee to the suburbs, folks from Puerto Rico, some black folks who had migrated up from the south, and occasionally Native Americans. What happened, in a crazy twist, I believe, not because of me and I don't think it was just done for me, but the world decided to come to Buffalo about the same time we opened Jericho Road. And the vision of being able to be a missionary doctor really has been fulfilled the last 30 years, just staying in Buffalo. Initially what was happening as the refugees were started to pour in, is that they would go to the health department and get screened. TB, some of the diseases, infectious diseases, and then the health department would say, go find a doctor, which was pretty challenging because they didn't have Medicaid. Doctors weren't necessarily looking to take care of people who didn't speak English, and so a lot of people fell through the cracks. We decided to go to the health department and say, let us do the initial assessments. At first, they pushed back a little bit, like, are you sure you know how to do TB screening and all that stuff? And I assured that I'm a family doctor, highly trained. I know how to screen people. And I said, you let us screen them, and then they'll become our patients. And for the next 28 years, that's what we've done. It's been a huge blessing to us. The ability to design a system of care that loves our neighbor by providing healthcare and all kinds of other resources is the fuel that's allowed Jericho to grow. Even today, I, every Tuesday evening, set aside a clinic just to see new refugees. Our refugee friends in Buffalo are hurting. There was a federal executive order on January the 20th said that the direct entry into the United States for refugees under the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program had been suspended immediately. In addition, all funding for resettlement of refugees who had recently arrived to the USA was to be discontinued as of January 27th. In Buffalo, this order has affected 731 refugees who had come, but we're still on their 3 to 6 month resettlement pathway. So, the refugee resettlement agency we work with, there's 4 of them. They lost their funding that day to finish out the resettlement of these refugees. In addition, thousands of refugees are stuck back in the camps waiting to come. They've been through all kinds of vetting, et cetera, et cetera. Their cases are in limbo. Many are separated from family. It's not uncommon for the mom to come first or the dad to come first and then the rest of the family to come later. And this has been frozen. Refugees have been a vital part of Buffalo for the last 30 years. Presence has stabilized our population loss, is bringing Buffalo back. I can't imagine a Jericho Road or a Buffalo that does not have refugees as a vital part of it. The global poor are also our neighbors. Now, I'll make that argument because in 2001, a woman named Fabian came to Buffalo. She was from Sierra Leone. She came with her family, and she was fleeing the war. We took care of her as a new refugee. She describes hearing, she came early that day to Jericho and heard some singing and some people praying in the background and realized this is where I wanted to be. We took care of her family. She became our patient. Eventually, she had been a nurse in Sierra Leone. Eventually, she got her nursing degree in Buffalo, started working for us. And in 2009, she came to me and said, Dr. Glick, I need to go home. My family is suffering. There's no health care for them. She had lost an uncle because of a stroke. And she said, would you help? And I said, well, if you go, we will follow. And that began this journey of basically following our refugee friends back home and helping them start health centers. We provide the funding, some of the support. These centers are all locally staffed, locally led. We now have 3 health centers in Sierra Leone that Fabian leads. We have a health center. Really, these are all basically hospitals. We have a hospital now in Goma that is working basically behind enemy lines, given the recent rebel takeover of Eastern Congo. And we have a health center in the Himalayan mountains of Nepal. And this work has grown and honored God in so many different ways and is such an amazing privilege to be a part of. There was a federal executive order in January that set the dismantling of USAID. It said that it's the policy of the United States that no further foreign assistance shall be dispersed in a manner that's not fully aligned with the foreign policy of the president. USAID was founded in 1961 by President Kennedy. Its purpose was to help advance goodwill of the U.S. government to the world by delivering life-saving food, clean water, medical aid to millions of the world's poorest. Last year, in January, it had an annual budget of $40 billion and a staff of 10,000 people. Top 10 nations that were invested in last year read as a who's who list of places in the world where people are suffering the most. Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Syria. In January of this year, the budget was cut to basically zero, and they now have a staff of 15 people. The person that was assigned to do the cutting and is still doing the cutting, including right now the World Food Program, which is near to my heart because in Congo, Goma, I've never seen more examples of malnourished children. We actually run one of the things our health center does is run a very innovative program that provides infants with 200 infants with food, but also reaches out to their moms and their grandmas and does this holistic thing. But we see so many malnourished children in Goma. A lot of the support for that work comes from the World Food Program. The person in charge of making the cuts right now in these vital programs from a global standpoint is a 28-year-old attorney named Jeremy Levin with no experience. He has no idea, I don't think, of what they are doing other than to cut. Jericho Road is now seeing the devastating consequences of this action against USAID and the World Food Program in Sierra Leone, in Congo, and Nepal. There's no doubt in my mind that many infants, children, even adults will die needlessly because of this action. Asylum seekers are our neighbors. In about 40 years ago, a group of Catholic nuns in Buffalo came together to start a shelter that they called Vive la Casa. And the need for this shelter was because Buffalo is a border town. And they were finding that many people were passing through Buffalo on their way into Canada. And some of these people needed to get their papers in order before they could cross the border, and they didn't have a place to stay. And so they opened this shelter on the east side of Buffalo in an empty old school building. About 15 years ago, we started providing health care to these folks, these asylum seekers. And about 10 years ago, we were asked to take over the shelter. And for the last 10 years, it's operated as a program of Jericho Road. We provide shelter anywhere from 70 to 120 asylum seekers every night. I will tell you that, and as a result of this, we provide health care, legal aid, food, shelter, lots of different things. The journey that many of these folks take to get to Buffalo is heartbreaking. Many of folks now figure out, and they come from all over the world, and the same countries where we get refugees from. They're just coming in as a different pathway, and their status is not assured when they come in, as compared to refugees who are on a pathway to citizenship. People many times will start their journey by getting to Brazil or Ecuador, walking or riding a bus up to this place called the Darien Gap, which is a big, huge jungle that is the extent of the border between Panama and Colombia. It takes about a week to get through that jungle. And then they walk or ride a bus or take a train. There's this train that I recently watched a video of where people are on the top of. It's like a freight train, and people, whole families jump on the train before it starts moving, and they go to the roof and they ride their journey. This journey, and once they get to our southern border, if they figure out a way to get across, they're often detained, put in detention, or let go, have to report to ICE. They apply for asylum status, and then that starts a journey. Many of them, or some of them, end up in Buffalo, either on their way to Canada or they just hear about Vive and they need our help to process their legal status. We've heard horrible things. This journey is not easy. It's traumatic. A lot of times by the time people get to us, they've been imprisoned. They have experienced sexual exploitation, rape, trauma. Had a family recently who lost 3 of their 4 children when they were crossing a river in Guatemala. They're often very traumatized by the time they get to us. These are our neighbors. I think it's, one of the things that's happened recently is the definition. Words matter. So when we talk about refugees, folks that are allowed into the United States on a pathway to citizenship. We talk about immigrants who have a visa and they come in to visit the United States. We talk about asylum seekers who cross our southern border or come in however they come in, and they apply, they ask for a chance to go in front of a judge and state their case that it's not safe for them to go back. This is a right that's a Geneva Convention, a universal human right. And then you could talk about undocumented folks. Unfortunately, right now, the way our government mostly talks about all of these categories is that they are illegal aliens. There were 3 orders that specifically target asylum seekers. There's the order that said that to protect the meaning and value of American citizenship, you will no longer gain citizenship by being born in this country. Something that had been put in place in 1864 to as a result of basically a result of black folks being brought as slaves and giving them a chance to be their children to be actual citizens in this country. It's been a right that's been there forever. It's been there for Italians and Irish and all kinds of people who have come into this country. The Supreme Court has blocked that initial law. Second order was, in order to stop the flow of illegal aliens, a series of actions were initiated, including determination to complete the physical border wall, prevent the entry of illegal aliens at that border, detain illegal aliens in prisons across the country, bring criminal charges against illegal aliens, a promise to deport all illegal aliens, and also bring criminal charges against those of us who provide shelter, legal aid, food, and other help to illegal aliens. And then the third executive order was one that would bar all illegal aliens from receiving any federal benefits. It attempts to ensure that federal funding to all localities and states does not provide any help to legal aliens. 2 FQHCs, one in Brooklyn and one in New Mexico, interpreted that order to say that they would no longer provide health care to non-citizens. These orders are a real threat to our work at Jericho and to the people that we serve. First of all, folks are afraid. Asylum seekers, students here on the internet on a visa, even refugees who are not yet citizens, who are going through the process. I got a letter 3 weeks ago. I'm the CEO of Jericho. It was addressed to me. We had, with the prior administration, gotten a series of grants from FEMA to help with the last 2 years have been challenging in New York because a lot of asylum seekers were bused to New York City, hundreds of thousands from Texas, and then some of them came to Buffalo. We, for a while, were helping 500 people in hotels in Buffalo, and we also are actually still doing a program with the state where we have 75 families from New York City who are brought to Buffalo and helping to resettle them. And then we have Vive, the shelter. And last week, one of the families that we had invested a year's worth of time, apartment, got them work authorization, helped them with their ICE check-ins, got them jobs. They were deported. They were arrested and then deported. And the reason, from what we can tell, is that they had failed to notify ICE of their new address, their new apartment. What was most cruel about this was that when they were arrested at home, there was mom and dad and a 6-year-old and 11-year-old. And they were arrested, detained, and 2 days later deported. They're from Colombia. What ICE must have not known is that they had a 17-year-old in the family, living in their house, who wasn't home at the time, and now is in Buffalo by himself. That's the kind of lack of regard that the current administration is showing our neighbors. So why do asylum seekers decide, or refugees, why do these folks decide to leave their homes and start on this journey? I think it's a critical question if you really think about the humanity of the situation that we're facing in this country. Because if you can believe that these folks are all criminals, if you can believe that somehow they're just here because they want to get rich, or, it wasn't really that bad, maybe then you can somehow in your mind justify what we are doing. I thought this was a great sign where it says, parents, how many borders would you cross if it was the only way to keep your baby safe? There's a poem I'm going to read that was written by a Somali asylum seeker who now lives in Great Britain. And I'll just read some of it, but I think it speaks to why, like, we don't think about doing this. Why do people actually think about doing this journey that costs everything? It's called Home by Warsan Shahir. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breathe bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with who kissed you behind the old tin factory is now holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade threatens your neck. And even then, you carry the anthem under your breath. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. No one crawls under fences. No one wants to be beaten or pitied. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. What I tell people is that the bottom line is the folks that we take care of in Buffalo are just looking for a safe place to call home for themselves and their family. That's what they're doing. The recent presidential campaign, there was a lot of back and forth. But I think the thing that bothered me the most to my core was the presence of political ads in the last month of the campaign that specifically targeted transgender folks and made them look like not human. Transgender folks are our neighbors. This administration has put several orders in place that are challenging to our neighbors. The first is an executive order that says it's the policy of the United States to recognize only two sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable and are granted in a fundamental and incontrovertible reality. The second was that health centers are prohibited from providing surgical or medical care to people under 21 years of age who are in transition. We don't do transition of care at Jericho Road. We don't do the medical care. We don't do the surgical care. But we have patients who are trans. We have employees who are trans. Joyce and I have dear friends, multiple friends whose children have decided to transition. One of our partner FQHCs in Buffalo, the CEO told me when I was talking about some of the challenges that we're facing, he said, Dr. Glick, we are taking care of 2,000 people right now who are trans. The reality is that in Buffalo, our neighbors, some of them have chosen to this life. They are human beings. They are God's children, and they are our neighbors. We don't get to choose who are our neighbors. We don't get to choose who do we show love. Final neighbors I want to talk about is folks that are historically marginalized and discriminated. Black folks are our neighbors. There's an executive order that read, it terminates all DEI initiatives, environmental justice offices, all equity action plans, equity-related grants, DEI performance requirements for employers, contractors, or grantees, and also terminates all titles such as Chief Diversity Officer. And then there was a second federal executive order that abolished the use of pronouns other than his or her. Every day at Jericho, it feels like in the last almost 30 years, as a family doctor, I have seen the effects of more than 400 years of racism, slavery, discrimination against Black folks. This history is the root cause of healthcare disparities. It's why in the zip code I live, people average life expectancy is 80. In the zip code I work in, the average life expectancy is 70. It's why in general, Black folks live 5 years less than white folks. We can't ignore this reality. We can't not talk about it. We believe that in order to address this, we need to act in ways that promote equity. Our mission statement at Jericho is actually, at Jericho, we care for our community and advocate for systemic health equity in order to demonstrate the unconditional love of Jesus. We are determined that this mission will not change. The second question that's really asked by the passage I had read, the story of the Good Samaritan, is what does it mean to love our neighbors? Given this action against our neighbors, what then should followers of Jesus do? I'm going to talk about 4 areas, and hang in there with me. I believe that one of the most important ways that we can love our neighbor is this idea of proximity, this idea of building a relationship over time. I believe it's through relationship that we can start to understand what folks are going through, and we can start to understand what it means to love. Han Mo came from Burma in 2000. He was one of the first Burmese refugees that came to Buffalo. There are probably now 30 or 40,000 Burmese folks living in Buffalo, and I'm pretty sure most of them come to us at Jericho Road. And Han Mo and I have had a relationship, a friendship, and through that friendship, we've played soccer. We've gone to Nepal together and Sierra Leone together and Congo together, and I've learned so much from him. Soccer. When I think about, I grew up in Belize, love soccer, even though I've taken up some other sports over the years, I recognize that soccer has to be my first love because it's what I always dream. Not the only dream, but if I dream about sports, it's about soccer. And one of the great things I love about soccer, especially as I've gotten older and people view me as Dr. Glick and the CEO and all that stuff, is that when we play soccer, those titles melt away. And people just view me as someone who plays soccer. That relationship. I guess my question to you, my question to the church is, can we start to build relationships with our neighbors so we can begin to understand the injustice that they are facing every day? The problem with our country, I believe, and our churches is that so much of the time we are siloed. We're in the suburbs. We're in our own little space. We have our yards in the back, not in the front anymore. We have our swimming pools all just for ourselves. We have walls built up, and we go to churches where people like us are together, and we don't know what our neighbors are facing. And so it's easy for us to make judgment. It's easy for us to support folks who are not going to treat our neighbors well. The first step is proximity. The second is, I think we need to speak up. I don't think we can be silent when we witness the suffering of our neighbors. This sign was put up in one of our main offices at Jericho back in 2008 or 2009, because you remember that was the year when we all talked together as a country about what universal health care would look like. I remember taking my oldest son at the time. We went to Washington, D.C., and we knocked on congressmen's doors. And I remember still seeing Michael share with one of the Congress people about why he thinks it's important that we should have a universal health care system. We've left that sign up. I think everyone at Jericho knows they better not take it off, even though I'm not, I don't usually make decisions about decor at Jericho. but I believe it was important in 2009 for me to bear witness to the inequity in our healthcare system, and it still is today. I think it's important for us to think about, and for me to remind folks that there's this biblical call for justice that is echoed throughout the scriptures from Genesis to Revelations. There's and I'm not saying that we're headed towards, Nazi Germany. I am saying that we need to stand and we need to speak. And in reference to that, I want to share with you a saying by Martin Niemöller. He was a German theologian and a Lutheran pastor in Nazi Germany. And in the early years, he was taken by, he allowed the Nazi influence to be in his church. He didn't speak out. He was actually anti-Semitic. But at some point in the 1930s, he recognized that something was really wrong, and he decided to speak up. And for that, he ended up in the Dachau concentration camp and spent 7 years there. He was a contemporary of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who gave his life in 1946 as part of the Confessing Church. There's this famous saying that is attributed to Martin Niemöller. He said, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, but I did not speak out because I was not a Catholic. Then they came for the Jews, but I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, but there is no one left to speak up for me." Question for us, for the church, is can we start talking on Sunday mornings in our places of worship about the injustices happening in our world? The third challenge to you about loving our neighbor is that I believe we need to stand with. It was in the summer of COVID. What a year that was, 2020. In March, we had to deal with COVID, and in June or July or May, whenever it was, George Floyd was brutally murdered. And there was all kinds of protests. The morning after that happened, I showed up early, probably at 7 o'clock, to one of our sites where I was going to see patients that day. And I parked in my usual spot, and I looked across the street, and I was like, whoa. And there was this graffiti across the front of our building. This is a building where we started Jericho. I hate graffiti, and this was Black Lives Matter. And I was pretty upset. And my first instinct was to call our Jason, who's our building person, and say, "Jason, get over here and fix this before 8:30. And then I was like, I don't know. And I called Manny and called Barbara and talked to Shawana and called to Keisha. And we came up with a better plan. We asked one of our teammates, who's an artist, to come up with a mural, a painting, an original painting for each of our sites that would represent, in his mind, the idea of Black Lives Matter. And this is what he came up for the site that I typically work at. And we have it hanging in the front. And we decided to leave the graffiti across our building until we got those paintings in place. Forgive me for this next picture. I was traveling to visit my mom, who lives in South Carolina, a couple weeks ago. And on the way back, I'm driving up the 85 to Charlotte. And I was like, whoa. And I had the presence of mind to grab my iPhone while I was driving 65 miles per hour and take a picture, because I knew I was going to be presenting to you guys. The reason I think I leave this up there is to say something which is a challenge. Again, that's all I'm trying to do this afternoon, is I think there are times in our lives as followers of Jesus where we have to decide, do we stand with the oppressed, or do we stand with those who oppress? We have to stand. Questions for us. Are we willing to challenge the racist systems that are still in place that harm our most vulnerable neighbors? If you want an example, I'd love to talk to you about Medicaid as a clear example of that. 2, can we come together as Jesus followers to do projects in our community that bring health and economic opportunity and bring people together to love our neighbors. The final thing I would say with regards to loving our neighbors, the final point, proximity, speak up, stand up. It takes courage. We need courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. I believe that courage is a decision to do the right action, even in the face of great fear. If we are to confront evil, then that our neighbors are facing, we must act with courage. Examples of courage at Jericho. You guys all did the same thing. We decided to put our lives on the line to help patients with COVID. At the beginning, when we didn't know where this was going, we didn't know how many people we were dealing with Ebola, we were dealing with the flu, we didn't know. We just decided to act. Our decision to keep Vive, that shelter, open, despite immense pressure from the federal government, is an act of courage. I think I was going to tell you about a letter I got from the federal government a couple weeks ago, and I think I just went off and lost track. But I got this letter a couple weeks ago because we get federal money from the front. We got in the past federal money to do the work of asylum seeking through FEMA to help asylum seekers. This letter was addressed to me, and it said basically that now FEMA is concerned that we may have used the money they had sent us in a way that was helping illegal aliens. They asked me to do 3 things. First thing they asked me to do was to provide the names and addresses of all the people we have helped. The second thing they asked me to do was to list out all the ways that we've helped them. And the third thing they asked me to do was to sign an affidavit that I won't ever do that again. We don't know if our actions will potentially instigate a criminal investigation of our work. We now are operating a hospital in Goma that's behind rebel lines. We have a team of about 120. Every month they deliver about 200 babies. They're taking care of one in January, I think, at the height of the conflict there before the rebels won. They saw 8,000 patients in 1 month. Guys have Chantel is the woman there, and Fidel is our chief of global, and Fidel visited them recently, and his act of courage to visit, but more importantly, Chantel's act of courage to keep that hospital going is something that is an act of courage. It's what we need. Question for you is, are we willing to house asylum seekers in our own homes if they must go into hiding and need a safe place to stay? So I'm almost done. When you read the book of Acts, I think you have to be impressed by how seriously these first and second generations followers of Jesus really knew what it meant to actually be Jesus followers. You know, whether it's someone like Peter who had seen Jesus alive, or people who were first or second or third generation Christians who had heard the stories. The people in Acts, like, they took this stuff seriously. They sold their possessions and came together and lived in community, or they had the courage to stand in front of an audience of thousands of Gentile people and pray for God's Spirit to fall, and before you know it, everyone's speaking and everyone understands the language. It's a crazy book. I think Acts chapter 19 is a classic example of that craziness. Some of it I don't understand. I mean, there's a part at the beginning of the chapter where they're healing people. People are bringing in like pieces of clothes of someone who's at home who needs to be healed, and Paul and Peter and others are praying over that, and they take it back to the home and they're healed. There were some people that Paul was preaching in the synagogue for a couple months, and then people kind of were pushing back, and he was like, well, then we're getting out of here. We're going to go to the temple, the Gentile temple, and we're going to preach there instead. And people who took up the name of Jesus but didn't really know what they were doing, and they were casting out evil spirits, and the evil spirits came into them, like crazy stuff. And then at the end, there's this amazing story. And this photo is to remind me of this story. So for 2 years, they were in Ephesus. And Gentiles and Jews, a lot of people were becoming Jesus followers. And as a result, the people who made the idols that people worship, the silver idols, the gold idols to this god named Artemis, were losing their business. And they got upset. And so they filled this Colosseum with angry silversmiths and other kinds of people. And there's a cool part where Paul is like, I want to go talk to them. He wants to go into that Colosseum. There's thousands of people there. They're angry at him. And his own handlers had to hold him back. And they sent someone else out, and they calmed down the crowd. And it made me ask the question, are we, again, the church, like these guys were so serious about their faith that they basically made thousands of people go into this Colosseum and yell for them to be killed, right? And Paul was willing to go in and talk to them. Are we, the church, willing to follow Jesus in such a radical way that it gets you in trouble? I'm going to close with this. So Representative Congressman John Lewis, the late John Lewis, contemporary of Martin Luther King, the classic, led the march across Selma, got beat up, the classic picture of him bleeding, would talk about this thing called good trouble. Are we willing to get into good trouble? I'm going to close with a revision of the Martin Niemöller quote, and then I'd be happy to answer questions. Some of you may want to leave. I'm here if you want to ask questions. First, they came from my neighbors, who they called illegal aliens, and I did not speak up because I was not an illegal alien. Then they came from my neighbor, who's an international student here on a green card and is outspoken about what is happening in Palestine, and I did not speak up because I'm not Palestinian. Then they came from my neighbor, who's a 14-year-old girl who's pregnant from a rape and wants to have an abortion, and I did not speak up because I'm not a woman and I don't believe that abortion is right. Then they came from my transgender patient, and I didn't speak up because I'm not transgender. Then they took away all the funding for poor rural children with AIDS in Sierra Leone to get the medicines they needed to keep them alive, but I didn't speak up because I'm not poor and I don't have AIDS. Then they told us we can no longer speak of the injustices of the past that are the root cause of why my Black neighbors tend to die young. But I did not speak up because I'm not Black. Then they came for me, and there is no one left to speak for me. Thank you very much.